Alright, so what are the fundamentals of art and how do I learn them? This is going to be the start of a series where I am, hold on, where I'm going to be going through the fundamentals of art for my specific art goals, and I'm going to share some exercises and stuff in my practice with you guys, and you'll be learning with me. So, what are my art goals? Which, obviously, because this is about me studying the fundamentals for my art goals. So my art goals are to basically draw characters, monsters, and environments, landscapes, stuff like that. Probably more oriented towards characters and monsters, but that's of course that's what my goals right now. Those are eventually, or they are open to change. So they may change on later on. So, uh, so yeah, those are my goals. So what are the fundamentals for those goals? First off, well, what are the fundamentals? The fundamentals, there's many different opinions, and I encourage you to have included some sources down below in the description of some sources to see what a few people say what the fundamentals are. There's a really good one from Psychra, which is here, that he has a pretty good chart here that really explains what the fundamentals, or it kind of has what fundamentals are, and it says who needs to learn them and stuff. So, from my understanding, I think there are four fundamentals that can be boiled down from everything that I've seen so far, and those four fundamentals are form, perspective, composition, and value, and everything else, like anatomy, for example, is a subset of form, because what form is understanding an object, like this tape measure or whatever here. It's understanding this object in 3D space, understanding that object so well that you can feel, what it is, and you know how to manipulate it in that 3D space. You can see all of it, you understand all of it, and you know that like a cube, when you understand the form of a cube, you can manipulate it and shade it and do other things. So by understanding form, knowing every side within a 3D context, that's going to help you tremendously. That's a very fundamental. But anatomy is a subset of form, because anatomy is specific to a living creature or something like a human. The anatomy of your fingers, for example, those are really small forms on a big form of the human body. It's like, for example, your palm has this form here that's an anatomical form. So it's a subset of form. But so the fundamentals, there's those things. There's form, which I just explained. There's perspective, which is understanding and being able to place forms within 3D space and make it feel real, basically. And you're really understanding how 3D space works. And you understand how forms work, so you can place forms within 3D space. And that's really important to understand to make a realistic drawing or image, illustration. And there's composition, which is really more of, I would consider that kind of storytelling, where you have, what are you trying to convey with this piece, and how can your composition tell that? Like, is there a story in this? How can you best convey that story to your viewer? If you throw it up in the the top left corner, does that say something different from putting it in the middle, for example? So understanding where to put stuff and how to do things is really vital for the viewer understanding your illustration. Then there's value, which is, once you understand the form, is shading that form and putting a light source in there and understanding how light interacts with stuff and different things. So those are the four main core fundamentals that everyone needs to know, from my understanding. Like, no matter what you're doing, you have to know those four fundamentals Well, unless you're not going to do any shading, in which case then you could drop value. But I would say form, perspective, and composition are very critical to needing to know, to understand how to create what you want to and express yourself. I would also say value is very important because that's how you really add kind of depth. It's how you communicate depth, really. But you don't necessarily need it. Like there's many line drawings and stuff, so you don't really need shading per se. But I mean, I'd still say it's essential. Then there's the subcategories of like anatomy, which is subcategory form. And I'd say proportion is kind of a subcategory of anatomy and form, because it's how things, the size of things, how they relate together. And then there's color, and these are just the fundamentals that I'm going to be learning, that is. So I'm going to be practicing form, perspective, composition, value, anatomy, proportion, and color. Those are the the 7 fundamentals I'm going to be repeatedly practicing and going over and practicing over and over and over with you guys. So, those are the 4 core fundamentals. Is that what I said? There's proportion, which how things relate to each other. Then there's color, which is another a subcategory, I'd say, of value. Which color is very important for it, like it's increasing your ability to express yourself and understand what different colors do and what emotion that gives, and it gives you more options, but also you need to learn how to limit those options and how to create things with those options and stuff. It's an important one because color is very exciting to work with, but you need to understand how to use it. So those are the fundamentals that I'm going to be practicing. There's other fundamentals, probably, like, for example, animation. That's a fundamental, like movement, how things move. That'd be another fundamental, but that's not what I'm practicing at this point in my life, because it's not my current goal to be an animator. So these are the fundamentals that I'm going to be practicing for my specific goals, to draw characters, monsters, and environments, and potentially other things. Who knows? So how do I learn them? And that's always been a huge question for me, because as a beginner, you don't know what you don't know. So you can't, it's really overwhelming when you start learning about something and it's really cool, and then the more you learn how much you don't know, and it's really overwhelming, and as a beginner, you're just like, ugh, and it's really discouraging. Excuse me. And so having practiced art for, I don't know what, about 3 years, off and on, like not off and on, but lightly practicing art for about 3 years, I feel I have a much better idea of what the fundamentals are, and I have a much better idea, I feel, that I know what to practice now to get better. I'm not that great in art, but I feel I know what I need to practice specifically to get a lot better, a lot quicker. Focused practice really. I don't know, like, this is the whole point of this series, is for me to really research. Like, I have a vague idea of what the fundamentals are. Now I'm really researching, how do I practice those fundamentals? That's the basic idea of this whole series, is to learn what things I need to do and to do them. And to provide, you value too. And to provide a structure for both myself and all of you to follow, should you want to learn art too. Because structure is, for me, I'm very much a very structure-oriented person, and when I have structure, I've noticed I work tremendously better than without it, because without structure, I'm kind of aimless, and I'm just like, well, what do I really draw? I don't really know what I'm doing. Like when somebody says, well, you just need to practice more to get better at art. It's like, okay, but what specifically do I practice? And I even go as far as, what exercises do I practice? Because when somebody just says, go practice form, for example, well, how do I practice form? It's like, I don't know. Well, as a beginner, that's what I have no idea. He's saying to practice form, so I gotta go do some research or whatever to practice form. Versus if somebody says, you need to practice form, here's some exercises to help you. Not to say only do these exercises, but here's some really good exercises to help you understand and practice form. So the point of this is to provide a structure for you and me to follow within that. And the plan is I'll basically study a fundamental like form, for example, and I'll look into it and I'll see, okay, this is what I need to practice in form, and here's some exercises I can do to practice those things, and I'll share those exercises with you, and I'll be doing them too. It's really to share, or it's for me and for anybody else who wants to learn art. I'm going to be learning what the fundamentals are and practicing them with specific exercises, and I'm going to share that structure of those exercises with you, because if I could never, I haven't looked a whole lot, but I could never find a lot of structure to follow. So the plan of how we're going to do this is we're going to pick a fundamental and practice that for about 2 weeks, because I took I stole that from Proco, the 2-week period, because that having practiced that and looked at his stuff, I've taken that advice of practicing something for 2 weeks, and it's a true thing I've experienced it, that practicing something for 2 weeks is a really good amount of time to really understand something, but not to get bored of it. Because after 2 weeks, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done drawing arms. I really don't want to draw anymore. And that way, you're not kind of getting burnout. You're still mixing things up and getting inspiration and excitement by not continually doing one thing that you've already done forever. Like it's circling around or studying multiple topics and then going back to that topic for another 2 weeks, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm doing a 2-week study. So choose a fundamental for 2 weeks, and I'll research it and see what exercises we can do, and I'll share those exercises with you, and even potentially we could finish off the week with some kind of challenge. Like for example, I'll give you, okay, here's 3 exercises you can do every day. You can do 1 a day, all 3 a day, whatever. But make sure you're practicing form every day. That's the idea, or as much as you can. And where am I? I lost myself in my notes here. So you just practice these. These are the exercises we're practicing and focusing on for 2 weeks. You don't necessarily only have to do these exercises, but do as much of them as you can. And we may finish it off with a challenge of some sort. And then once we do that for 2 weeks, we'll move on to the next fundamental and practice that for 2 weeks. And eventually we'll go down the whole list, and once we've finished everything, we'll go back to form and then repeat the whole process. And it's so for example, the first time we visit form, we'll do basically really simple stuff because it's tailored for learning it, for somebody who's never been introduced to form before. So we're going to learn form by doing really simple exercises on the first iteration, right? The first iteration will probably just be like placing really basic like cubes and spheres and cylinders in a space. And then after that, once we go through that, we'll do that for about 2 weeks, right? We'll do that, maybe a couple other exercises. And say a challenge of that may be to like build a cool monster out of cubes and just spheres and cubes and cylinders, or whatever the basic shapes are. So that could be a challenge of that or something. And once we go through, all the fundamentals will come back to that, and we'll build on top of what we learned previously. So previously we learned to do basic shapes in a space. Now we can do basic shapes in a space and start carving out those shapes, or adding organic shapes and placing basic shapes on those and combining them into things, or do a study of animals and placing basic shapes on animals and stuff. So we're going to go around and build on top of it, and not do the exact same exercise every 2 weeks, but build on what we know and do something more and harder and more complex. And in theory, this will go on for forever, because I mean, you can never, from what I've been told anyway, and what I've researched, you can never study the fundamentals enough, because they're fundamentals, and the more you get good at those, the better your art potentially is. So that's the idea. Once we go through, we're just going to repeatedly practice these 7 fundamentals, and I'll provide, get stronger and stronger as we go through them all every 2 weeks. And that is how that's going to go. I don't necessarily know what we're going to find or learn, but I'm dedicated to learning art, and so this is the process of how I've decided to go about it, because I really desire a structure, and I want to provide you a structure if you want one too. So I'm trying to provide a value for you and myself, mainly for myself, and because that's selfishness, right? Now that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give myself a structure to successfully practice and learn art, and I hope I can help you along the way too. So that's what this whole series is going to be, and yeah, let's get right in to the first fundamental.